Well, there's been more claims and revelations from the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into state capture. Former Bosasa Chief Operating Officer Angelo Agrizzi today produced a recording of a conversation. In part of the testimony, Agrizzi said Gavin Watson relayed a conversation about Deputy National Prosecuting Authority head Advocate Nomgcobo Jiba and the role she was trying to play in allegedly trying to stop a particular case from being prosecuted. Then, later, he played a recorded conversation which suggested that now former NPA prosecutor Glynnis Breytenbach wanted to prosecute people at Bosasa. Let's take a look at some of the highlights of what transpired at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry today.
Jiba basically wanted to get the docket, and Anwar Dramat wouldn't release the docket because she wanted to close it up. That's what was told to us. The next sentence is then he talks and he says, well, then Jiba took the cock off the case. Now, you must remember that he would have got his information from another source as well. So somebody else has informed him on exactly where the process is at.
Other than MT this time?
Correct. Other than MT and other than Jiba.
Yes.
So he's got other information which he's got. So then he explained that Jiba tried to take the cock off.
Is that the same person that we've spoken about earlier?
That's why I said earlier that we need to be very wary. Because
I know it's late in the day. Sorry, we must not speak together.
But then the cock came back on. So he's referring to the 2012 matter where the cock goes off the case and she comes back on. Smuggled back onto this case, he says. So he's had this conspiracy theory that Glynnis Breytenbach wanted the cock on the case because she could control the cock and the cock could basically prosecute successfully Bosasa.
This is Breytenbach's thing. All she wants to do is discredit us in the paper so that when this thing comes up, okay, our agreements with the banks that come up, okay, overdraft facilities and that come up, they throw this thing in the press, always calling it up in the press. All they want something to stick so that they discredit us in the press.
Chair, I'm here telling you the truth.
Yeah.
I've exposed everything that I know. I've exposed myself to South Africa. I'm not about to tell you a lie.
Yeah.
Well, that was some of the testimony given today, and of course our senior reporter here at SABC News, Mrwebi, was in the hearing for us. He joins us now in the studio. Mrwebi, good evening. Okay, let's start with the National Prosecuting Authority. A lot coming out about its officials today. I mean, what's the claim against these officials?
Well, it was quite dramatic. I mean, Steve, hearing that some of those senior officials that you and I have known for a long time. I mean, Miss Nomgcobo Jiba, for example, was codenamed Snake because I think they were quite fearful of her, of what she could potentially do. So I think they gave her that name Snake. And then Mrwebi was nailed because they said, oh, you know what, she was doing things quite very slowly. But quite startling, Steve, is that those people are said to have been on the payroll of Bosasa. Nomgcobo Jiba, 100,000 and Mr. Mrwebi, 10,000. Of course, there were many others. And all this in an attempt to make sure that they don't go near Bosasa because Bosasa was involved in illegal activities, so they didn't want them to be investigated.
I mean, frankly, this is like something out of a movie. So we have a person who comes and testifies and says, this senior official, who for a long time was actually the acting National Director of Public Prosecutions, running the NPA, she was taking 100,000 rand a month?
That's what is being said. I mean, and then you look at the SIU report that was compiled for about 10 years ago, and then no action has been done on it. I mean, you look at these claims of what Mr. Agrizzi is saying and versus what the report that has been there, it's just sitting. And then you start really to connect the dots. But, I mean, Steve, it's not only those two individuals. I'm just mentioning them because I think those are the ones that we know. There is a network of people, really, that was somehow bought. And then to the point that some of those people would share confidential information of the NPA with Bosasa. And all of this in an attempt really to shield the Bosasa from prosecution. Remember the kind of contracts and tenders that they were getting and they were being awarded. So almost all of them were through corrupt activities. So they knew exactly what was happening. So as a result, they needed to have people who would really make sure that they are protected.
There's also this idea that there was a tussle or a fight over a docket between Advocate Jiba and Anwar Dramat, who was head of the Hawks. And then we have, from what I can see, actual NPA dockets, which are supposed to be kept, I think in a safe at the NPA in Silverton, actually being passed around.
Exactly. Because why? Some of the people, according to Agrizzi, had been paid, were on the payroll. I mean, one of the things that Agrizzi actually was saying was the reason why they would not pay you, let's say, 500,000 once off, because they need that loyalty. You must really always, be answerable to them. So the reason why people were paid, regularly, was to be able to control them. So those documents that we are speaking about is because others knew that they needed to protect these individuals. But some of the people, remember the NPA, so did not know about this kind of massive corruption that was going on. So that's why time and again you'd have those kinds of tussles. But the sum total of it all is that there was massive corruption. But something that is interesting, Steve, so all those implicated have an opportunity if they feel all that is being said about them is wrong. They have an opportunity to go to that platform to rebut that. And of course, Agrizzi appears to be very well armed because we've seen the videos, we've seen the audio recordings.
And so what we would have is Advocate Jiba, Advocate Mrwebi answering questions under oath on live TV as well.
Absolutely. And it's actually very interesting when you look at those two individuals. There is a separate inquiry looking into the fitness of whether they are fit to hold office. And then you have this kind of allegations being leveled at them. So it's, yeah.
We'll cross to see Paul Stuurman, your colleague, there in a moment. Okay, the other big aspect today around journalists. So there's been this claim, it's been in the ether on social media, but also a suggestion in testimony today that there was money being paid to journalists, or at least money was being paid to someone to be paid to journalists. And yet, the evidence leader did not actually ask for the names of those journalists.
Well, it's quite interesting. You could have been in the room when it was said journalists were paid. Most of us, it was just a sigh, like, who are those? Because we thought perhaps the evidence leader was going to continue so that we get the names. Because what they are basically saying is that there was about 71,000 that was being paid to Mr. Zek Modise, and then that 71,000 would be shared with some of the journalists. So I think what perhaps should happen going forward is that we need to know the names of those journalists, because at the moment, the public is saying, wow, you guys are reporting about corruption as talking so much, so you also are part of this. So it would be very interesting if this thing could be followed up so that those journalists who are being paid could also be exposed.
Mrwebi, thank you very much indeed tonight. There'll be more, of course, from him when the commission does actually continue. And don't forget, on the record tonight, after 8 o'clock, you'll hear a conversation about the media and its reporting on the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into state capture. It was a busy day in the courts for former President Jacob Zuma's son, Duduzane Zuma. The state provisionally withdrew corruption charges against him. The case related to allegations that he was present